Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. Today's video is a review of the new Hulu film, Fresh. This film has been the talk of the town, known as Film Twitter, ever since it had its premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. It's a film that I do recommend you go in cold for, where you don't look up any spoilers or details before watching it for the first time. That's just my personal opinion, it's my recommendation, but I will give some broad strokes feedback first in a spoiler-free section, and then I am going to talk about some spoilers, so proceed at your own discretion. I will also give a verbal warning before I get into more of those spoilers. Fresh is a film with a basic premise of exploring the horrors of modern dating, and make no mistake, it is very much a horror film. You have the protagonist, Noah, played by Daisy Edgar Jones, and she's introduced as someone who is struggling with dating. Then you have your romantic lead turned antagonist, Steve, played by Sebastian Stan. He seems alright at first. Noah's feeling him, so to speak, and then things take a turn. For starters, I really liked the visual style of this film. There is a location that gets used for a significant portion of the film that I thought was either beautifully constructed or beautifully chosen. I don't know how much of that location was done on a set that was constructed versus a place that already existed and was simply, I don't know, rented. But it made for a beautiful backdrop to certain things that were happening in the film. There was some really great cinematography by Paweł Pogorzelski. Really sorry if I butchered your name. I really don't know anything about the Polish language. I love when a film knows when to throw in a good Dutch tilt or even just go fully upside down. The budget for this film is only listed as being something around $15 to $20 million, so considering that they've really done an effective job in downsizing for this project where you only have a couple of actors playing named characters, you've limited the amount of locations that you're filming at. The overall film is considerably elevated by having this visually stylish cinematography and some really nice editing choices as well. There's also a great use of music throughout the film. That's another way to zhuzh up a film when you're working on a smaller budget. I liked that the film was not constantly relying on violence and gore to convey the horror within the premise. A lot of what you see is more so emphasizing the psychological horror. A lot of it is more so about the implication of what's happening that you are not seeing, or what might happen in the future. I don't mean that in any way to be snobby against films that do like to use violence and show it more freely. There is a time and a place for that. It all depends on the story and how you execute the telling and presenting of that story. I'm just saying it was refreshing. I know I like to give the Stepford Wives a shout out from time to time, and that's another great example of building your way up to impending doom without being as full on with something particularly violent to watch. If horror is not your thing, then maybe this film won't be for you, but if you're someone who only sometimes likes to watch horror, then I think this might be one of those films that you can watch and enjoy visually, stylistically, the performances, and even things that are in there subtextually, but I cannot talk about any subtext or commentary until we get into the spoilers. So as a point of reference, I would say if you can handle watching Jordan Peele's Get Out and Brian Fuller's Hannibal, then I would say that you should be able to watch this film without having any major issues. Now I want to get into spoilers, so if this is where you would like to click off, then I will simply tell you that Fresh will be available for streaming on Hulu on March 4th, so I do recommend that you go watch it. Now let me share some of my more specific feedback. At the beginning of the movie, when they show that Noah is practicing boxing with her friend, I immediately knew at some point she was going to fight this man that she would be meeting in this movie. Why are you showing me that she does boxing when you could have just as easily shown her doing, oh, I don't know, Zumba or yoga? Exactly. You need to plant that seed into our minds that she is not completely incapable of throwing a punch. She's by no means an MMA fighter, but she's just not starting from point zero. When she meets Steve for drinks, and he started saying he was a doctor, but he was using words like boob job or nose job, I'm going to be honest, my first guess or reaction was that I thought he was lying. I just felt like a real plastic surgeon would have said things like breast augmentation, rhinoplasty, vocabulary like that. But if you've seen the film, then you know that he does in fact know his way around a scalpel. One of the things that I liked about the writing early on is that they're very subtle in how they have Steve ask these seemingly innocuous questions when he's getting to know her, and Noah does not recognize how suspicious these questions are, but the audience can pick up on the way that he's fishing for very specific information. Kind of like when he asked a question that was something along the lines of, "Have you told anyone about me?" About you, but I think that question is suspicious. Even if we weren't the audience that knew that something in this viewing experience was going to go terribly, terribly wrong with this man. I love Noah's friend, Millie. When Noah got all excited about going on some surprise trip out of town with a man she just met, and Millie was immediately suspicious, and she said the line, "It's a straight girl's fantasy come true." I'm pretty sure that I yelled out loud in response to hearing her say that, but truly though, where is the lie? I also yelled when the opening credits rolled. 30 to 40 minutes into the film, I didn't even remember that they had not yet done an opening sequence with the title card or all the names you would expect to see displayed until they just dropped it all that way into the film. It was an interesting choice and it was a bit iconic actually. What I ultimately ended up liking about Fresh the most though were the details that offered deeper thematic exploration and discussion. I don't need every film I watch to give me something socio-political to ponder, but it certainly doesn't hurt if a film does do that. When the film first started, I couldn't help but wonder, is this all the film is going to do? Is it just going to present a superficial portrait of how dating is difficult and sometimes the person you meet is disappointing or a creep? Is this film simply going to be the worst case scenario of that? Is it just going to present the fact that the conventionally attractive white boy is actually a cannibal who wants to sell you off bit by bit to rich cannibals? But when you look past that, there is something to be said, particularly when Noah is having dinner with Steve and she asks him if he only eats women, and he says yes. His explanation was that this is what sells. That's what there is a market for. If you've read about the colonial origins of trafficking in what is now known as the North American continent, when you read about how people like Christopher Columbus, these colonizers, trafficked indigenous girls, you cannot help but realize that there's something to be said here in this movie's text. It's not about claiming that it's only men who partake in this system or that women are the only people who suffer under it. As a matter of fact, they even have the reveal in the film that Steve's wife, because not only is he a murderous cannibal, he's also an adulterer, she is also involved in the scheme. She knows what's going on. If you would like to be generous and interpret her as being just some helpless victim of Stockholm Syndrome, I would have to respectfully disagree. I feel like that's an oversimplification of what she does. Even when she finds out that Steve is dead, she still continues to work to continue perpetuating this secret business that disproportionately harms women. I think there's something to be said for how the film's narrative celebrates women banding together and collectively rising up to fight back against the threat to not only their bodily autonomy, but their very lives. In particular, their willingness to help Penny, even though at this point she's someone who has already lost a limb, which means her mobility is extremely limited. Given the circumstances, I wouldn't put it past a different storyteller to treat that character as a sacrificial lamb to the antagonist of the story, and I'm really glad that they didn't take that approach. I was reading a bit about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre since a new film in that franchise just came out, and how the film was used in a study on the effects of multiple exposures to filmed violence against women. In the study, a group of men were shown 5 different films depicting differing levels of violence against women. One of those films was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. On the first viewing of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the men in the study experienced symptoms of depression and anxiety, but Upon subsequent viewing, they found the violence against women less offensive and more enjoyable. Now, I don't reference this to say that horror films with violence in them are the root cause of systemic misogyny and violence against women. That is an extreme oversimplification of a very large, multifaceted issue. But all I'm saying in bringing this up is that it's really nice to have a horror film like Fresh that doesn't do tacky body horror that predominantly happens to women and further fuel this tendency that already exists. You don't actually see a lot of violence happen in the film against women. The most violent thing we see is at the end of the movie when it's the final showdown against Steve, and they fight for their lives and give him exactly what he had coming to him. Fresh was written by Lauren Kahn and directed by Mimi Cave. I'm not going to oversimplify the matter by saying that any women writers or any women directors will automatically do stories that know how to correctly handle this type of subject matter just because they are women, but these are definitely women that did an incredible job. The Last Duel was a giant call out of systemic misogyny, and Ridley Scott directed that and did an excellent job being sensitive about how he presented that material. For Fresh as a film, I found that these two women, Lauren and Mimi, did really exemplary work with the writing and directing to address things, but to not turn the violence against women into a spectacle. I'll be honest, when we got to almost the very end of the film, I couldn't fully read what Noah was doing when she is seemingly opening up emotionally to Steve over dinner. I did have to wonder if she was going to get seduced and coerced and traumatized into joining Steve in his world. I knew she had originally had this plan to try to trick him so she could escape, but I didn't know where it was going when she started crying like that. I was wondering, is she going to replace his wife? Is she going to become a sister wife or something like that? You never know with these movies if the ending is going to be something tragic where she doesn't get away, but I'm glad it ended the way that it did. I also thought it was really cute that Noah and Millie were able to have this nice moment together in the forest after Millie came through with that shovel. Are they the epitome of friendship goals? Perhaps. If you've made it this far, hopefully you will have already seen Fresh, so let me know what you thought of the film. If you have not watched it, go watch it. It is quite the ride. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. We've got another Hulu original coming up next week that I will be reviewing since I got press screeners for it added to my account. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.